I want to move more specifically into this game, this season. This FSU loss early in the year kind of brings up this idea, and you touched on it, that, hey, all is not lost for Florida State. How do you think that's going to impact specifically the SEC, which looks like it's going to be a nightmare for teams like Oklahoma and Georgia, even though Georgia, and I think you and I both agree, like as talented as anybody in the country. Is there anybody that can actually go through that schedule undefeated?
No, I've got them. I mean, power rating wise, I think they're the best in the country to start the season. I think they're going to lose 2 games. I don't even have them in Atlanta. I don't even have them playing for the conference title game. So that's just a matter of scheduling. When you're looking at any kind of odds board or rankings or ratings or what have you, and you're going to they go to Bama, they go to Texas, they go to Ole Miss. They play 6 of my top 21 teams, 5 of them away from Athens. The totality of that's going to catch up to you. Saban's best teams rarely went undefeated. Kirby's lived in the SEC East for a while, and now they venture out into a little more shark-infested water. They may be the biggest shark there, man, but that doesn't mean you can't get a bite taken out of you. So I say all that to say, one of the other chaos scenarios this year is, what if there is legit cannibalization in the SEC? Or what if these teams just aren't elite? What if they're just really good? What if Georgia is
what if parity over the last couple of years is actually what's going on, and the elite teams aren't, tangibly way better than everybody else? That's interesting.
What if we just tune in Saturday? It's like a noon kickoff Eastern time, I think. What if Clemson is up 23-20 on Georgia, fourth quarter? No one expects that. They're a 2-touchdown favorite. What if, like we just said, what if Texas goes to Michigan? They can't move the ball in week 2, and it's 13-12 in the middle of the fourth quarter.
Not out of the question, by the way, with that defense.
Not at all.
Not out of the question.
And so Bama goes to Wisconsin. What if they're clunky up there early on, and all of a sudden everyone's just losing 2 games? And Missouri,
so then let me interrupt you. Who's the beneficiary of that? That conference specifically?
Missouri and Ole Miss. Those are the 2 beneficiaries. There is such imbalance in that SEC schedule this year that you could have Missouri, not so much Ole Miss. You could have Missouri, from a Vegas standpoint, be power rated as the 5th best team in that conference and go play in Atlanta and in a 1-game situation have a chance to win the thing. It's really crazy when you look at what the schedule makers dealt Florida versus what they dealt Missouri. It's not even the same sport, much less the same conference.
No, and I would point more towards Oklahoma, because I think Oklahoma is just more of a legitimate contender than Florida. I know that Florida's schedule is brutal. I don't think any of us believe that Florida could make a run if it weren't for that schedule. They're not there yet in terms of roster, but OU is. Venables is in his 3rd year. They've got a quarterback that they believed in enough to allow Dillon to walk. And now he's, in some cases, the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy as a starting quarterback for Oregon. They've got a defense that is largely back. Billy Bowman, Danny Stutzman. And yet they've got these 6 games. So I did this whole thing. I don't even include the Auburn game, which is a fool's errand on my part. I understand that. But they've got these 6 games in their schedule that are brutally tough. Obviously Texas, they've got Tennessee, they've got LSU, they've got all these games. And in my mind, I was like, if they just split them and they go, 9-3, they could probably go to the playoff. But in reality, when you start filling out the bracket and you realize Notre Dame's got an easy schedule, and you realize the group of 5 get in, you realize the ACC gets in, and you realize the Big 12 gets in, all of a sudden, guess who gets boxed out? Yep. A 9-3 Oklahoma team, because they lost 3 times with a brutal schedule.
Hey, that 2-game stretch, they got Tennessee in their week 4, Heupel going back to Norman for the first time as a head coach, and then they go to Auburn the very next week. That is a real quick 1-2 across the jaw of just kind of life in the SEC. They may be smack dab in the middle of it or out of it already by the end of that 2-game stretch. But, you just mentioned something. I don't want to totally overlook this. It may be nothing, but the 2 favorites right now in the Big Ten, according to most people at least, would be some combination of Ohio State and Oregon.
Yeah.
They each have quarterbacks that kind of got chosen over. I mean, Kansas State thinks they got the better of that proposition between Avery and Will Howard. And then you just mentioned Dylan Gabriel, he moves on because they got Jackson Arnold there. And how crazy is it that at the top of the leaderboard, 2 viable national title contenders, mind you, and Ohio State and Oregon are being led by quarterbacks that kind of were the second option in the other places. Just something to file away for down the road.
I find it so fascinating. You know, the OU Oregon one with Dylan Gabriel and Jackson Arnold, I do believe it was a case of styles and fit. Like Dylan fits what Oregon and Will Stein, their offensive coordinator, wants to do more. Jackson Arnold fits what Oklahoma is built to do. You know, with all those guys, Andrell Anthony and for all those guys on the outside, they need to be a down the field passing team. Well, that was not what Dylan Gabriel was going to do. And so when I did their game last year, even the game at Cincinnati, they won the game. And I was just like, it doesn't feel like a fit. I love what Dylan is doing. I love what the wide receivers are doing. But when you try to mesh them together, it's like, nah, I don't know. That's why I think Jackson Arnold is going to be a better fit for Oklahoma, while Dylan Gabriel could probably excel at a really high level at Oregon. And maybe the same could be said about Will Howard and Kansas State moving to Ohio State. But this whole thing with Ohio State is, I don't even think they need, let me choose my word carefully here. They do not need great quarterback play this year. I agree. With their roster, with Chip Kelly, with that run game. So he's going up there, and the value that he brings is not his style, it's his experience. And the fact that he's got that experience, I think, is going to pay dividends for them. Move to the Big Ten. Well, you and I both are backers of Ohio State. I think it's pretty crazy not to be honest with you, with that roster. They're veteran, they're experienced, they're talented. They remind me of what Michigan was a year ago. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a compliment to them that they only shed because of the logo that you just mentioned in the sentence. That is about as versatile a team in terms of style they could choose to win with, I think, as any team in the country. Also, I think if we go back to like the mid-20 teens, when Saban had his vintage defenses talent-wise, there'd be a week where they'd stone someone. There'd be a week where someone caught them and hung 31 on them. The point is, they won different ways throughout the year. So that's the roster that Ryan Day has there right now. And so it wouldn't surprise me. I'm excited to see their secondary against Dylan Gabriel, by the way, when they go up to Eugene. Like, that's one of the individual matchups of the year. Nothing
with Tez on the outside.
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing more needs to be said about that. But I also think, like Ohio State, I think a lot of folks got caught up on the portal stuff. And the first words out of anyone's mouth once you walk in the building is, yeah, it's great. The portal's great. It's great we got Caleb Downs, maybe the best football player in the building. But the ones that came back, just like the story was with Michigan the year before, the ones that came back, in Michigan's case, by the way, you know this, I don't think a lot of people do, guys who turned down big offers to go elsewhere and came back. Ohio State, maybe not so much turning down the big offers because you can make a lot of money at Ohio State, but choosing to come back. In a roundabout way, you're talking about 20 minutes ago about what NIL has done. Carson Beck's back at Georgia because NIL allowed him to be back at Georgia this year. This Ohio State defense, a lot of them are back instead of playing on Sunday or in training camp somewhere because NIL allowed them to be.
Yep.
Did you see that thing Jim Nagy put out a couple of months ago now, where he was talking about what the standard list, how deep in standard years their pre-draft board would look like before a season, and how much deeper it was right now, and how it was so glaring that there were a lot more guys that used to be headed off to Sunday that are still around the sport this year because on the fringe of first, second, third round, NIL has kept them here. Ohio State, I think, is the biggest beneficiary of that. Someone could go win a conference because a couple of guys hung around this year.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt. Oregon, by the way, I think is going to be a great team. I believe in Oregon. I know you do as well. I do, and we joked on social media, no one on game day picked Ohio State to win it. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine, because there are great teams, and you and I both know that. But then you said nobody believes in you except me, Ohio State. And I'm like, I read that and I was like,
shame on them. What? Hey, look, there's room for both of us in the front seat. I'm just saying, how great is it that you can latch yourself on to the most talented roster in college football, and it's
like they're the underdogs.
It's like this little caboose with a flat wheel on it. Someone's got to take them. We'll take them. That's fine. Go Bucks.
I'm like, it's like you're picking in the schoolyard and all of a sudden people, that passed over for like 3 or 4 picks and you're like, wait, I'm sorry. That kid hasn't been picked yet?
What rash does he have? Yeah.
I'll take it. I don't care what rash he has. That'll clear up by playoff time, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm in. So I thought that was pretty funny. What are the teams that you think could take advantage of the scheduling imbalance in the Big Ten?
Penn State, weird answer, I know, because they don't play a soft schedule. Penn State's last 4 games are probably against non-ranked opponents. The way I see them is you got them in week 1, so you're doing the Penn State-West Virginia game. Yep. It seems to me like the quintessential, we got 2 new coordinators, we're trying out a new offensive coordinator, we haven't given up on this quarterback at all, nor should you, still got a ton of talent. We're mixing and matching at wide receiver. It seems like the kind of team that takes a little while to get itself up to offensive speed. Now, in years past, Penn State's just kind of been what they are offensively. They can put up mirage numbers against inferior opponents. Big boys shut them down. Ohio State, Michigan shut them down. This year, I think they probably have a little bit higher ceiling in terms of offensive potential. There's no excuse why both those tailbacks shouldn't be 1,000-yard caliber tailbacks. Yeah. I think the Koldenicki, Drew Aller marriage probably makes a lot more sense than the guy they had there last year. So my point there is, go win. Like SMU somehow got by Nevada. Doesn't matter. They won. Go beat West Virginia by any means necessary. Buy yourself some time to get that offense up to speed. If it gets up to speed, I don't care if they beat Ohio State or they don't beat Ohio State. At home should be a competitive game. They've got 4 games at the end of the year that they can just flex and flex and flex and flex in. If they've hit their offensive stride and it's a higher stride, therefore they're earning benefit of the doubt in the committee's mind, and they're an 11-1 or a 10-2 non-conference champ. Forget if they go to the conference title game and win it. That's a whole different conversation. I think their schedule sets up well for them because it's not backloaded.
Yeah, I agree. In some ways, them and Ole Miss are kind of mirrors to me. You could put them at 3rd, 4th right now if you're looking at their conference, and then you think to yourself, yeah, but with the schedule that they have compared to what the other teams have, they should be. I mean, Penn State, candidly, really should go to the Big Ten championship game. It's the top 2 seeds. They don't have the division. No team was left out of the 4-team playoff more often than Penn State, who would have been in a 12-team playoff. Of the last 8 years, they would have made 6 playoffs. I don't know what that would have done to perception for James Franklin and everybody at Penn State. Here's another one, though. I want to throw out another one. And this is one that I'm kind of like, I know, I get it, and maybe I'm not supposed to as an old Colorado guy. But Josh, Nebraska really should be playing some games in November that have actual legitimate implications for the playoff. If you look at their schedule, they've got Colorado at home. If they can beat them, they likely would be an undefeated team facing Ohio State. And then even if they lose to Ohio State with 1 loss, they're sitting in that same boat we're talking about Penn State, that you're playing really meaningful games in November.
That's the one where we've sat here in years past and looked at a workable schedule for Nebraska, and then get reality just hit you in the face. Same thing this year. I just believe in him a lot more this year. The whole Matt Rule year 2 principle is in play, by the way, and it's been tested.
Because he did it. He's done it.
Proven. I mean, general rule of thumb: if you do it at Temple and Baylor, you can probably do it in Lincoln, Nebraska. So, how about that whole flip of Dylan Raiola from Georgia to Nebraska? And what was funny about that, you would have loved to hear this reverberating through the South. People in the South were up in arms because money was the deciding factor in that recruitment. I don't know if you're aware. You're aware, but scoundrel, I think, was a word I heard thrown around in regard to Matt Rule in Nebraska. Well, he's going to be a true freshman. He's going to start for them. It reeks of the kind of thing where if you do nothing more than flip your fortune in 1-possession games, you go from a 7-5 caliber team to 10 to 11-1. If they're 11-1, they're in. Right.
That's right.
Well, they may be in the conference title game, but even if they're not, yeah, especially if there's chaos elsewhere. You tell me a committee member doesn't get romantic about the possibility of putting Nebraska in the playoff? These are human beings. Absolutely they would.
100%. 100%. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.